Welcome to VU Sports Wired. I'm Eric Single alongside Jackson Martin. Our first episode of the spring semester coming at you right now. We have a lot on our plate to talk to you about, a lot of Vanderbilt athletics news all across the athletic center, really. We're going to take a step back before we get to some of the more pressing stuff and really recap the 2012 football season for you. Talk about Vanderbilt's 38-24 Music City Bowl victory over NC State on New Year's Eve in Nashville. Then we'll move ahead and kind of set the table for the 2013 season. Jordan Matthews deciding to return for his senior season and not enter the NFL draft. We'll kind of talk about how that affects the Commodores. Then we'll go to the hardwood, talk about the problems facing the basketball team so far, who's really going to step up and score down the stretch of this SEC schedule. And then we'll break down the game that's really been the highlight of the basketball season all around. Tuesday night's 89-79 loss to Ole Miss in Memorial, and exactly what went right and wrong for the Commodores there. And that will kind of lead us into a new segment on VU Sports Wire, which we're really excited about, called To the Whiteboard, where we break down a couple plays from Vanderbilt's last couple games for you and tell you how they were supposed to work and if they did or did not accomplish that goal. Then we'll come back, talk about whether or not Kevin Stallings might see himself on the hot seat coming up in the next couple of months if the basketball team continues to struggle. Then we'll set the table for you in the week ahead. But first, like I said before, it's time to talk a little more football, to kind of tie a bow on a season that was historically enjoyable for Vanderbilt fans. Absolutely. And it all capped off with a business-like dismissal of NC State in the Music City Bowl. What was your big takeaway, Jackson, from Vanderbilt's win on New Year's Eve in Nashville in front of a crowd that really showed up and supported the team?
Well, I think that the biggest takeaway we had is, it's a takeaway that we've had earlier this year, is that that's just a good football team. And the strides that Coach Franklin and his staff have made, despite losing some seniors next year, there's undeniable progress in the program there that I think you saw, and especially saw in just how thorough that win was in all three phases of the game, perhaps minus a kick return for a touchdown special teams. But we saw a lot out of a lot of different players from Vanderbilt, and I think it gives us cause to be nothing but excited going into next season.
And another cause of that excitement was, of course, Jordan Matthews' announcement that he would return for his senior season right as the spring semester was about to get going again. Jordan held a press conference with his family in attendance and athletic director, and Coach Franklin was up there next to him. And Coach Franklin obviously in high spirits. The entire program was in high spirits about having a number one wide receiver threat back in that manner. But having him back, what on the field danger does this bring to this team? With Matthews and Boyd alongside each other for another year, what can we expect out of that grouping in 2013?
Big plays. Coach Franklin said before the offseason that his biggest recruiting target was going to be keeping Jordan Matthews for just one more year. And I don't think anyone can deny that that is going to have the biggest impact on the field next year for the Commodores. Matthews is, I think, by the end of the season, had established himself as the best player on that team. He comes up with big plays, he gets the little plays that get first downs and move the chains. He is a guy who can do everything from the wide receiver position, and we saw a lot of that in the Music City Bowl too, with two long touchdowns. Vanderbilt fans have to be excited to have Matthews back for another year. No matter who the quarterback throwing to him is going to be, Matthews is going to make him look a lot better.
Exactly. And I think some schools in the SEC, outside of Vanderbilt, outside of Nashville, were kind of cracking jokes and maybe criticizing the Commodores for even holding a press conference at all for a guy that doesn't get a lot of national attention. And his decision whether or not he was going to go to the NFL draft might not have been press conference worthy to some of the other schools in the SEC who remain dismissive of Vanderbilt. But it's easy to forget that if you take away a couple plays in the South Carolina game, this guy could have had an even higher profile year. And I mean, the start of the year, you talk about how electrifying the end of this past year was, but that South Carolina game could have turned him into a campus hero right from the start and really built some momentum to where this guy is a national attention type player. And I think in 2013 we'll definitely see that with the level of talent that just graduated in the SEC. Time to move to the hardwood, a little bit less of a distinguished part of Vanderbilt athletics at this point, but the men's team, if nothing else, has been a lot of fun to watch in the first three-quarters, half of the college basketball season. It's a young team, as we've discussed at length on this show. They get really excited about great plays. They get really down on their bad games. It's really been a roller coaster for better and worse. And Kevin Stallings, just like the rest of us, appears to be hanging on for the ride. But the most pressing question, Jackson, has been the offense. 2 games Vanderbilt has failed to score a point a minute in 2 games this year, scoring 33 points in losses to Marist, who is about 8 games under 500 in whatever podunk division they are up in the northeast part of the United States. And then they scored another 33 in a 56-33 loss to Arkansas last weekend, which was really the most embarrassing loss of the season and probably the most embarrassing basketball loss of my 4-year career at Vanderbilt. Just a complete all-systems failure against that press of Mike Anderson. What's the biggest issue facing this team as far as the scoring is concerned? We have a couple experienced players, but there are a lot of guys that look unsure out there.
Shooting.
Very good.
The team can't shoot. And what's weird is that that's not necessarily, we saw it coming maybe a little bit, but to the level at which this team has been unable to connect on jump shots it's at a tier that I don't think anyone foresaw it being this bad. Certainly not me. And that's really what it comes down to is you see guys getting open shots. You see ball movement. Obviously, they struggle with the press a little bit, though in the final minutes against Ole Miss, we're able to break that press quite often. You're seeing a team that's got open guys and just can't knock down shots, which is why those games when the shots fall, they're going to play great. And you're going to see them play tough games against the Kentuckys, against the West Virginias and Davidsons. Shots don't fall, you're going to see them lose to Marist.
Exactly.
That's going to be the story of this season.
Exactly. And last Tuesday, we saw one of those former examples where the shots were falling and Vanderbilt was playing great for maybe 35 minutes. It was really a charmed night for Vanderbilt basketball. Their game against Ole Miss last Tuesday, looking to get back on track, get their first win of SEC play. And up by double digits late in the second half, they let it slip away. A couple different factors, one chief among those being Marshall Henderson, who is the SEC's leading scorer, and it really kind of catalyzed the Rebels' comeback, making a bunch of big shots and really just antagonizing the crowd in a way that few players can do. He hit a couple huge shots late, but really the story up until his 35-footer that sent the game to overtime and then his dominant performance in the overtime session was the Vanderbilt three-point shooting, which was remarkably good for the start of this year and everything Jackson mentioned about the inexperience on these players and on this team. Vanderbilt hit 17 three-pointers, which was a Memorial Gym record and one shy of the school record for three-pointers in a game. After an abysmal performance against Arkansas and Kentucky, it was a welcome change. But the free throw shooting was just a complete disaster, shooting under 50% from the line, and that killed them heading down the stretch as Ole Miss started to make their comeback. And then once the three-pointers started to fall a little less frequently, the Rebels capitalized and were able to send it to overtime using some late-game dramatics.
Absolutely, and you saw it throughout the Kentucky game too. This team struggled from the floor and from the line especially. There was a long period of time in that Ole Miss game when the Commodores' shooting percentage from the floor was way higher than it was from the free throw line, and that's something that Kevin Stallings has to work on. Vanderbilt, while not always just a really strong free throw shooting team, has never had it be as glaring a weakness as it has been these last couple of games.
For sure. Now it's time for a special segment on View Sports Wired. We're doing it for the first time, but we like it a lot, so you can expect to see it a lot more as the spring semester goes on. It's called To the Whiteboard, where we break down a couple plays from recent basketball games or football games or whatever season happens to be in. This week we're looking into the last-second plays that Kevin Stallings called during the Kentucky game and during the Ole Miss game. One three-pointer was off the mark. One three-pointer gave Vanderbilt the temporary lead. But now, let's take a first look at a new segment on View Sports Wired, To the Whiteboard. Kevin Stallings is often criticized for some of his late-game decision-making, but early on in SEC play this season, he's put his team in position to win a couple times with some last-second play calls that have worked out and given the Commodores at least a shot at a big win. We're going to look at a couple examples today from the Kentucky and Ole Miss games so far this season. Starting with the Kentucky game, Vanderbilt takes the ball from out under the Kentucky basket with 6.7 seconds left. Keaton Johnson will be inbounding it from the baseline. And as you can see, the other 4 Commodores on the floor in this box formation. What's going to happen is Kyle Fuller, Dejon Parker, and Shelby Moats are going to set screens right in the middle of the key to help Rod Odom break free from the Kentucky defense out to the three-point line for a pass from Keaton Johnson. Keaton's going to hit him with that pass, and the screeners from then on are going to try to leak out towards the three-point line and give Rod some passing options for that final shot. But what happens as Rod starts to dribble to his left is Dejon and Kyle kind of leak towards the same wing of the three-point line looking for a shot. So it looks a little crowded over there. So Rod will reverse court and find Shelby Moats, who snuck up to the three-point line on the left side, hits him with a pass. Archie Goodwin lays out trying to break up that pass, which brings Shelby to the floor. And somehow Moats is able to get the ball to Keaton Johnson over here on the left side of the whiteboard as you're looking at it for that deep last-second three that nearly went off the back iron for the Commodores. But that was the last shot, and really with one of the team's best scorers, that's almost as much as you can ask for. When you look at the play again, Kyle and Dejon, who are on the opposite side of the floor as the play goes on, start drifting back towards the ball. And the Kentucky defense is really flowing towards the ball. So it looks after the fact that these two guys were way open. But you can see where Dejon comes out, Nerlens Noel is standing almost directly in between him and Keaton Johnson, making a pass nearly impossible. And Kyle Fuller is all the way on the opposite side of the three-point line. By the time he's back towards the basket, the shot's already off, and the rebound is there's not nearly enough time for him to secure a rebound. So Vanderbilt gets at least a shot off for the win against Kentucky, but with a little bit of the chaos that happened in the start of play, not exactly what they were looking for. Now Jackson's going to take us through the Ole Miss play from last Tuesday.
Okay, so last Tuesday, the Commodores got the ball at the end of the game against Ole Miss with the game tied 75-75. Now, Keaton Johnson is going to bring the ball up the court. He's just going to sit on it until there are exactly 10 seconds left. When the clock hits 10, Shelby Moats, playing down here in the post, is going to come on up and set a ball screen on Keaton's guy, which is going to allow him to drive into the middle of the lane. Now, there's 4 occupied Ole Miss defenders here. This guy is going to step on out to try and block off a potential Dejon Parker three-point attempt. What's happening, Shelby's going to roll back in as these other 3 collapse onto the ball. So really, Keaton has 2 options here, either the roll to Shelby Moats or, and the route that he did take, a wide open pass to Kevin Bright, who has just no one around him and hits what may be the easiest, what looked at the time like a game-winning three-pointer that we had. But 3.2 seconds left on the clock. Ole Miss had time to draw up a game-tying play of their own, and as we all know, Commodores would end up falling in overtime. But this look created by Kevin Stallings gave the Commodores a phenomenal opportunity to win the game in the waning seconds.
Great stuff there, Jackson. Let's talk about Kevin Stallings, who has taken more and more blame from the student body as these close wins have slipped away as his career has gone on, really, even back to the Jenkins-Taylor, Azalea core. That's been a chronic problem, and this year has obviously gotten worse when there have been no marquee wins to really build on. What does he need to show as far as improvement, any sort of tangible or intangible landmarks? What does he need to show the rest of this season to prove to the student body and to the fan base that this program has a direction and the youth on this team really has a goal and a sense of improvement?
Well, as we've talked about over and over again, this is an incredibly young team. It's going to have growing pains. What I need to see is improvement by the end of the year. And I'm certainly of the camp that I don't believe that Kevin Stallings should be fired for anything that happens this year. And I've voiced that before. I think that Kevin Stallings has too good of a history at this school of taking talent like this and doing good things with it, and also taking elite talent and doing merely good things with it too. But I think Kevin Stallings' job should be safe this year, outside of just a horrific losing streak that this team could go on.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind that maybe is not getting enough above the table attention is the impact of James Franklin on Kevin Stallings' position. I think the student body at Vanderbilt is obviously head over heels for James Franklin and in love with the progress that he's made with the football team. But that sort of 2-year turnaround is a national story for a reason because it's so unremarkable. And I think there's a sense of additional expectations put on Stallings, whereas James Franklin has just totally energized the football program. Stallings already had the program at this higher level, but his inability to really take the next step beyond the step above average,
right,
if that made any sense at all, has really kind of dimmed his star as far as the Vanderbilt fan base is concerned. So that's an interesting dynamic to kind of keep an eye on if the football team continues to succeed and then we move into the winter months and the basketball team continues to struggle and isn't rebuilding the way the other teams in the SEC are and doesn't have the same structural integrity that we thought it once did. Certainly that would fall more and more on Stallings as this basketball team goes on. That about does it for the show. A couple things to keep in mind. The upcoming week in Vanderbilt sports is another solid one. The Commodore's men's basketball team heads to South Carolina on Saturday afternoon to take on the Gamecocks and fire head coach Frank Martin, a game that I am super excited for just because I love coaches yelling at people and yelling at players and refs and each other.
Oh, man, Kevin Stallings.
Kevin Stallings versus Frank Martin.
It's been totally
underpublicized. Then coming back to Nashville for a Tuesday night game against Auburn, which could be pivotal if that South Carolina game goes in their favor. The Commodores stringing 2 SEC wins together as the Tigers come to town on Tuesday. So something to keep an eye out for there. The men's tennis team starts their season schedule with a couple home dual meets on Friday against Butler and on Sunday afternoon against Michigan State. So as the tennis season gets underway, the girls are in Miami right now, and I think they come back next weekend for the start of their home schedule at least. And also this week's a big recruiting weekend. A couple big-time recruits in town for the football team. The aforementioned James Franklin will be working his magic, and only a couple short weeks away until we see how many of them really like their visit and are inclined to play the next 4 years of football at Vanderbilt, maybe 5 years, maybe 6 years. Injuries, NCAA rules, it all happens. That's the lineup. We got plenty of stuff to talk about next Thursday at 6 o'clock here on VTV. For Jackson Martin, I'm Eric Single. VU Sports Wired is signing off for this episode, but have a great weekend and a great rest of next week, and go Doors.